First of all, I'd like to thank the organizer, Korean Foundation. It's my honor and pleasure to have a chance to talk about the global governance for the green growth. Well, my conclusion is simple. Well, we need some form of global governance to push this agenda, green growth. But more important thing is country-specific and country-driven type of their own architecture, their own structure is a very necessary condition to promote this green growth. That's my conclusion. Well, as Warren just explained, in this session we talk about a little bit longer term. You know, when I work for the IPCC, well, we talk about usually at the end of this century. I mean, how can we forecast the, something, the populations and GDP by the end of this century? As an economist, it's somewhat uncomfortable, but the issues that we tackles in this, the agenda is very much long run. I think we are talking about 2050. 2100, and how we're going to tackle such a global and the longer term issue. And green growth could be one of the practical strategy to achieve such a longer term goal of sustainable development or some other national goals. So what I'm going to talk today is about some country-specific examples and try to draw some lessons or key messages from there. I don't know. Can you put my slide over here? While they are preparing, I was lucky to observe, to join the last year's UN's process. As Warren said, this year probably we talk about much about the Rio Plus 20 and the Rio Summit in Brazil. Well, 1987, when Brundtland report was released, it's titled "Our Common Future," right? 25 years ago, under the UN World Commission on Environment and Development, they released the report, and 25 years later, to prepare this Rio Plus 20. Secretary General Ban Ki-moon asked some of the high-level eminent peoples to prepare a report to him so that he can include this one into a formal intergovernmental process of Rio Plus 20. And a couple of weeks ago, we released that report and we submit that on to the UN Secretary General in Addis Ababa. And the title was, I'm confused, our title was The Future We Choose. And the Rio Plus 20 official zero-order draft was released months ago, and their title is The Future We Want. The other way around, maybe, the common character, the keyword is the future. And 25 years ago, Brundtland report also, the titles Our Common Future. So we are really talking about, we are struggling how to shape up our future. And from that perspective, I could talk about what kind of global challenges. Obviously, it's more longer-term challenge that we face. And the second thing is for the governance for this green growth. Let me just give a specific examples from Korea or some other developing countries and try to deliver some messages. As you may know, the global challenges, and also Warren just described, that we face so many challenges, but very much related to our environment. And obviously the climate change is one of them. And the environmental ecosystem degradations and the resource issues, and importantly, because of this environmental issue also, the inequality is deepening. And unfortunately, most of the developing countries face, and they are much, much more vulnerable to climate change. And well, it's not fault. Well, I don't want to introduce the tedious discussion and debate going on in the UNCCC negotiation. But unfortunately, these countries, they have little responsibility, but most of the developing countries, they are physically more vulnerable to this climate change. And that increase more the poverty and income gaps within country and between the developed and developing countries. And unfortunately, again, those developing countries are very much dependent on climate-sensitive sectors like agriculture, but not based on irrigations. I think basically rain-fed agriculture practice is going on in most of the developing countries, and they are very much depending on weather conditions, climate conditions, and they have little room to move. And they have little capacity to adapt this climate change. This capacity means both soft and hardware capacities. I mean, physically, they have little infrastructure to adapt this new climate change, and the knowledge and softwares also, they are much less compared to other developed world. So those are the problems that the developing countries face now. And even worse thing is, when we go back to what happened in developed countries, I think in 1970s and 60s, 70s, and 80s, most of the developed countries, they tackled their domestic environmental issues first. Air pollution and water issues, they tackle it and they solve it. Then later, 90s and 2000s, they start to look at these global environmental issues such as climate change, biodiversity. But again, unfortunately, most of the developing countries, they face these issues at the same time. Today, they have to solve their domestic environmental issues. At the same time, they have to deal with this climate change and other global environmental issues. I think that's the challenges that the most of the developing countries now face. And for last 20 years, during this UN climate conventions and the negotiation, we keep saying that, yeah, we need urgent action. We need the internationally urgent action. But still, we keep talking about, okay, by end of this year, well, Kyoto regime will be finished, so we have to find a new regime. But, last year in Durban, they say, okay, let's postpone up to 2015. So we keep talking about the new regime. But, well, that's the situation that the most of the developing countries now face. Well, then we have to think about, okay, last 100 years, the developed world, Western and Japan and other developed countries, what they have done in their economic development is basically quantity-oriented, and the conventional economics that labor capital intensive economic development patterns has been prevailing and dominating. And we thought that was the economic development, economic growth. But can we continue, can we do this kind of economic development in the future? Considering all those challenges that we face now, developing countries especially, they can continue, they can follow what the developed countries have done. The answer is no, because of many constraints, the resource constraints and environmental factors. So we cannot do that. Then, is there any other new paradigm that we have to think of? That's kind of a new paradigm, new economic development paradigm we need. That's more quality-oriented, not resource-based, but the new idea, knowledge, and innovation, technologies. Those factors could be more weighted when we develop the new kind of paradigm for the next generation or next century. And at the same time, we have to tackle this climate change issues. So we need a new economic development paradigm. And we claim, as you see from my title, I'm from the Global Green Growth Institute. So our institute is claiming that maybe green growth could be one of the comprehensive and practical strategies or strategy to achieve such goals or develop a new paradigm. When, including our institute and many international organizations, OECD, last year they released a report about toward the green growth, and a couple of years ago, UNEP also released the green economy. But basically, the ideas and the concept of the green growth is to harmonize economic growth and protect the environment. And if possible, we could really improve the social justice. All those three are three pillars defined in sustainable development. So green growth is basically how to achieve the sustainable development in more concrete manner. I think that's the concept of green growth. Now, let me give you a more concrete example how and why Korea is moving quickly to this new paradigm of green growth in this country. Well, 2008, our president said, okay, the new vision for next 60 years in this country is low carbon green growth. Because 2008 is our 60th anniversary of independence. So he said, well, for next 60 years, this is a new vision. Then that's the vision. And why in Korea then green growth becomes a really national agenda? Well, we have problems. We have economic problems. As you may or may not know, Korea imports 97.8% of our energy from other countries. We have only 2%, 3% energy resources available domestically. Very little potentials of wind, solar, and hydro, that's it. And almost all coals, almost all oil, all gas are imported. Even Korea, we run, almost 40% something from the nuclear for our power generation, but uranium also, all imported. So our annual bill for energy, this is 2009 number, is 140 billion. It's almost 1/3 of our total imported volume. So if oil price goes up, then Korean economy is very much vulnerable to this oil price shock. And second thing is climate change. Well, according to the IPCC, the average temperature increase by the end of this century is about less than 1 degree. But in case of Korean Peninsula, it's double. It's more than 1.7 degree increase. So the climate impact to this peninsula is much bigger than the global average. And after Korea becomes OECD or some kind of developed stage, our economic growth, our economic development has been slowed down. And we have to tackle all these three problems at the same time. And we found, okay, maybe green growth is the answer for tackling those three challenges that the Korea faced. And last year, before OECD released their report, I think last February sometime, I was invited to OECD, and they asked me about how Korea could quickly move to this green growth, and they asked, what's the reasoning behind there? And I could summarize those 4 factors are most important. First of all, the strong leadership. It includes the political leadership, but the strong leadership from the top is very much important. For this government, from the very beginning, the president showed a consistent signal to the Korean community, saying that, okay, I'm going to go to low carbon green growth. for last 4 years, he keep sending the same signal that I'm going to go to this low carbon green growth. I think that's the most important factor, in my opinion, when we develop the new ideas and new vision and pushing it as a national agenda. I think strong leadership is very much important. Second thing is somehow Koreans try to integrate these ideas and vision into all sectors. So not only just the government, public sector, obviously private sectors respond slowly, but nowadays private sector also think that maybe there is some possibility where they could make some money in green business. So somehow Korea to integrate this vision into all sectors. And third factor is, I think, also very much Korea unique one and important. Still, we have some industrial base. As you may know, Korea is number 1 or number 2 ship constructing the country. I mean, our ship construction industries are number 1 or number 2. And ship constructions, and they have to make the big screw anyway. And they think that, okay, the wind turbine is not that difficult, comparing that technology. And now they're talking about, they're a little bit behind in developing this wind turbine or wind business. But those ship construction big companies, they are now designing 3 megawatt or 5 megawatt, large scale wind turbines for offshore the wind. So we have some still industrial base here in Korea. You may know Samsung, I mean electric, the companies well known for their, mobile phones and TV. Well, Samsung's small panel, it's not that difficult to change into photovoltaic, solar related, the panels. So now those industrial base could be the very important factor for Korea to switch to this green or to low carbon business. And finally, well, Korean government and public sectors, they are struggling still to develop very much action-oriented programs and the plans and strategies. For example, the Korean government for last 4 years, they keep the promise that, okay, we're going to keep 2% of our GDP investing in R&D in green area. And they keep their promise. And such kind of very much concrete action-oriented strategy is one of the factors why Korea could move quickly to this green growth. And well, as some other thing that the Korea before the Copenhagen 2009 convention, we just announced that voluntarily we have no obligation, but as one of the advanced developing country who also share the common responsibility, they, Korean government announced that, okay, we're going to voluntarily reduce our greenhouse gas emission 30% by year 2020 compared to the business as usual. And, some increase of our ODA more to the green area. So they say green ODA from, I forgot which percent, but anyway, by year 2020, 30% something of our ODA to the green area. So Korea tried to develop both domestic and international program to push, to promote this green agenda. And obviously, we from the very beginning, we design what kind of governance structure is efficient to push this green agenda. And under President, we set up so-called Presidential Committee on Green Growth, which include many relevant ministers plus experts from the private and academic, and almost every month, I think, I was a member of that committee in the first year, and almost every month, President himself chair this committee. And we discuss very specific details, program and actions with the President. That means interministerial coordination for promoting these green growth related policies are very much effective. And President himself check almost every month the progress and the performance. So this structure is very much important. And as I said, okay, so 14% in 2009, that's the portion of green in ODA, but by 2020, we're going to increase by 30%. And East Asia Climate Partnership, that's a kind of a grant program, 200 million programs, and for last 4 years, Korean government to promote this green growth with our neighbor countries in Asia. And one of the program is to establish this institute that I belong to. That's one of the global cooperation programs in Korea. And climate financing, I think Warren and I just intentionally missed this topic because we want to discuss that during our discussions. But I think the climate finance related issue is very much important because in my own opinion, there are 3 factors how to improve the capacity of the developing country. Well, 3: financing, technology, and their own capacity. So this support from the developed world to give some money to the developing country, that's important, but that's not critical. I think based on our own experience, the most important factor is the human capacity. 50 years ago, half century ago, when Korea first started our first 5-year economic development plan in 1962, Korea per capita income was less than $100. That's for sure. I don't know the exact number, $78 something. And we are ranked 110 among 120 countries. So we belong to the least developing countries 50 years ago. And now we are OECD member countries, and in this climate negotiation, we claim that we are a developing country, but many other countries think that Korea is already advanced developing country, or even some countries say, well, you guys are in developed world. But how we could move up? I think the most important factor is enhancing our own capacity. Korean parents, including my own parents, they are crazy about the children's education, sometimes too much. But I think it's somehow enhancing our own internal human capacity, that's the main factor how Korea move up so quickly without any capital, without any resources. So I think the most important factor for a developing country is to enhance their own capacity with some support from the developed world or international community. Well, they can give some money, financing, they can transfer some technology, but I think internal capacity is the most important. Well, so our GDGI, our institute, tried to help the developing country to develop their own economic development plan. Obviously, developed countries, they have their own capacity and they are much far advanced than us. So we help the developing country. Yeah, they have their own economic development plan. China, 12 5-year plans, and many other countries, they have their own economic development plan. And our role, and what Korea want to transfer is, okay, you guys have your own, but let's paint it with a little bit more green color, so that we can share our own experience, saying that, okay, if you just go ahead for the economic development, then later you guys have to pay more to recover the environment, to balance the social issues. You have to pay more for such issues. So from the very beginning, if you consider environment, if you consider social factors, then later you're going to pay much less. That's the lesson that we got. That's the probably lesson that we could draw from most of the developing countries, developed countries, and also including Japan. So that's the lesson that we want to share with other developing countries. That's the green growth plan. So we are not changing, we are not asking the developing country, look, you have to change your plan No, I think we just go ahead with those countries, but help them to design, develop some more green colors from the very beginning. That's the green growth plans. And we just do this exercise with the open architecture type of structure. We invite experts from donor countries and international agencies like World Bank or ADB, and domestic experts also. We form the team, and we develop the program. And as I said, I think the most important factor is capacity building. And capacity building, again, depends on country situation. So we try to develop this program with the international communities. And knowledge sharing, that's one of the important factors that most of the developed country, including Korea, we want to share our own experience and giving the opportunity for the developing country repeat the same mistake that we made, or they have more chance to make the leapfrogging, rather than repeating the same mistake that comes from soft knowledge sharing. And in case of Ethiopia, I think we helped Ethiopia to, the Ethiopia is one of the least developed developing countries, and Ethiopian government, Prime Minister Meles himself lead this new initiative, so-called climate resilient green economy, and we helped. And last year in Durban, Prime Minister himself announced this new ambitious plan for 2025 for the Ethiopia. They have a clear vision and goal. Okay, by that time, we want to achieve the middle income country target. And I was surprised when he announced this one in Durban, I was there. He said that, okay, we need a train system, but I don't need we Ethiopia, we don't need the conventional train. We don't have train system, but we need rapid train system. That's like a TGV in France, or Shinkansen in Japan, or KTX in Korea, which requires a lot of huge investment. But he wants to jump to this rapid train system rather than following the conventional one. And he asked the international community, including both the bilateral and multilateral donors, give us some money. I give you a lot more investment opportunity and higher return with this comprehensive plan. So that's something done in Ethiopia. And again, the Ethiopian, the governance structure for the climate resilience or green economy, they have their own domestic structure to push this green so-called CLG agenda. And Cambodia, we helped them. Again, Cambodia, when they approached to GGGI, they said that, look, GGGI, you help us to develop Cambodians' green growth master plan, and they understand the structural, the governance issue, and they understand they need a new law and act to implement this one. So they ask us, okay, we want a similar kind of green growth law that is already implemented in Korea. We need a similar thing. So we send our lawyers and our, the legal expert to work with the Cambodia to develop the very basic green growth laws. And that's the starting, that's the institutional arrangement for our Cambodia program. Again, I think this one is Cambodia's specific green growth plan. So the governance for the green growth is to meet their own demand, their own needs, rather than giving the menu from outside. Well, the key message is, again, as I emphasize very much, the vision and the political leadership. And second, obviously, we need some kind of global governance, including this global fund or technology issues. But more important thing is country-specific governance structure, as I shown in the example, and all stakeholders' participation. It's easy to say, but very difficult to invite and ask them to actively participate in the real program. And global regional collaboration, well, I think we could discuss such issues. And most important is the local engagement. Yeah, the top-down approach, the central government and political leaders and the CEOs in private sectors, they can show the vision and then they can show the plan and strategies and so on. But who's going to implement it? At the grassroots level, the local peoples have to implement it. So the local engagement is the most important factor for the success of this new paradigm of green growth. Thank you for your attention.